Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, where we answer your questions on history, on culture, and on society.
Right, and the question today has to do with post-traumatic stress disorder. It came from Andre, and he says, we have all kinds of soldiers being assessed now. We hope better and being treated for this, which is great. Now there's talk also of first responders sometimes who also have issues with that, who also need to be assessed and treated properly, which is fine. But the question he asks is, we're welcoming a whole bunch of refugees that are coming from countries where there's been a whole bunch of atrocities, and probably some of these people also have issues or may have issues at some point with post-traumatic stress disorder. What are the implications of this?
I think the first implication would be anybody that we welcome into Canada is entitled to proper medical treatment, and that includes, of course, treatment for stress-related disorders. It is very clear that stress is at least potentially very bad for you. Mind you, not all stress. Below a certain level, a life without stress actually becomes in itself stressful. You should have meaningful challenges. But there's a threshold level after which stress, especially if it is mismanaged, can become toxic. But there's an interesting question here. There's no doubt that we are doing well to recognize the impact it can have on people. But when you look at the number of people who seem to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder in the modern world, and then you think about conditions in the past, you find yourself wondering, well, why was it not so big a problem? And of course, some people's explanation is that the past is, in James Joyce's words, a nightmare from which I'm trying to awaken. That everything in the past was bad. Everything was patriarchal. Everything was sexist. Everything was insensitive. Everything was exploitative. Nobody cared about anything. And virtually everybody was walking wounded in one way or another. But I don't think that can be the case. Yes, there were people who came back, say, from the First World War, mentally severely harmed by the experience. Back then they called it shell shock, which might be an insensitive term by our standards, but the condition was recognized. But it wasn't thought to be terribly widespread. Did we just overlook it all? Or has something happened to us recently that we are unable to tolerate stress? So let me bring up again the condition of these Syrian refugees. Most of them have been through experiences unimaginably horrible by Canadian standards. So unless virtually each and every one of them is in a state of profound chronic crisis in their life because of it, I have to wonder if we sometimes are setting the threshold too low, that we've psychologized everything. We think everybody suffers from some kind of mental illness or another. It's like this oppositional defiant disorder. I had that when I was a kid, but I was just obnoxious. There was nothing special about it. There was nothing medical. So by all means, let's treat stress seriously. Let's treat those who need medical help seriously. But let's think about the way we react to life, the kind of society we live in, the messages that we send to people in that infamous phrase, to create possibly people who are less robust, who are too coddled as children, and then are overwhelmed by life's challenges. Now, I'm not talking about the severe cases, the firefighter who stumbles upon people who've died horribly in the course of trying to rescue people from a burning building, the soldier who's seen comrades killed horribly. But let's also remember that soldiers in wars throughout history have seen comrades killed horribly, and most of them, one way or another, have gone on to lead normal lives. And I don't think that inside it was a nightmare and they just put on a calm exterior. It happens, but I don't think it's all that common. Is there something about the way we are dealing with trouble in life as something unexpected and impossible to handle that's actually making people more fragile? That's not an excuse for not treating those who need help. But there is a question here. How many people really are traumatized by life, even by its more unpleasant aspects? And how many people just don't have the internal resources that maybe we had in the past for coping with adversity?
Mm-hmm. So it's a question sometimes of knowing when to say to somebody to get a grip on themselves and knowing when it is a case of really helping them because they have a genuine problem.
Yeah, but of how we raise people so that when they encounter something terrible, they're more resilient. And again, I'm not singling out those who succumb to stress disorders deserve our sympathy and whatever care we can give them. But I'm puzzled that there's so much of it. In a world that by objective standards, I'm talking about Canada, not the whole world, life is so much easier than it used to be. Were people in the past tougher? That's my question. And I think there's some evidence that they were.
All right. Well, thank you for that, folks. The URL, if you want to play along and ask your question, the URL, well, you will get the information on how to do that, is on your screen right now. Thanks, and see you next time.